Welcome back to Samcast, the podcast by the Students' Association of Management and Marketing at the University of Melbourne. We aim to be the go-to discussion space for all things considered in the world of management and marketing and how it links to you, your uni life, and future career. In this episode, we'll dive into all of the opportunities that students have to get involved in consulting at the University of Melbourne, namely the two subjects Global Management Consulting and Management Consulting. I myself recently took part in Global Management Consulting and found this experience so valuable. Over the course of the subject, you'll take part in real-life consulting projects with real companies, and in doing so, you'll develop some incredibly important skills and insight into the world of management consulting. I certainly had a blast, which is why I'm so excited to sit down with our subject coordinators, Tina and Andy, today.
To start off, we have Andrew on the podcast to tell us more about management consulting. Hello, can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hi everyone, my name is Andrew and I taught management consulting and a whole bunch of other subjects at the University of Melbourne. You may have had me for principles of marketing, business negotiations and business ethics and so on.
Thank you so much for being here. First off, do you mind giving us a little overview of management consulting and what type of skills and concepts students can expect to learn?
Sure. So management consulting has been running for quite a long time at the University of Melbourne, and it basically takes students, who have been studying lots of theoretical type concepts during their time at the university and places them in the real world, with quotation marks around it for last semester because students didn't have their houses. But yeah, we partner them up with clients in Melbourne and we give them a project to undertake for the semester. And the projects can be management-based, marketing-based, can be finance and so on. And usually a combination of all of these different skills are required. And sometimes students, they have heaps of experience in a particular area and others are sort of learning along the way.
And from the handbook, we can see that the subject has a quota of only 60 students and that entry into the course is quite competitive. Can you tell us a little bit more about the application process and how entry is determined?
It's a little bit different this semester. Usually there's interviews that are undertaken, but this semester it is looking at students' WAM scores. It's sort of been a bit chaotic this semester. Well, because entries into the subject have closed for semester one. There's cut-off points for that, which students can find on the website. But yeah, it is quite competitive where students are sort of attempting to get in and get a leg up because they're on their way out to the real world. It's a combination of different things, but we do interview students and we do look at their WAM scores, whether they're available for the subject.
So one of the reasons why management consulting is different to the other subjects is the unique opportunity to work in the real business environment with real clients. Can you tell us a little bit more about the types of clients and companies students have worked in the past and what type of companies they can expect to work with in this subject?
Yeah, so it's always evolving. Each semester we get a real variety of different clients, a lot of consulting-based ones, so such as we've got Deloitte and KPMG that have come on board in the past. Look, I've been involved for a while, but I've worked with Disney, Telstra, all of the big four banks. But the thing is that we also have a lot of smaller clients as well, and not-for-profit organizations. And so students always want to work for the big, the big companies. But there is so many advantages of working for smaller organizations as well, because for the big clients, it's usually pretty strict in what they want you to do or what they don't want you to do, whereas there's a lot of autonomy with the smaller clients as well. That means that if you apply for the subject and you get allocated to a client that's not a household name, please don't despair, because there is so much that you can learn from these smaller organizations and not-for-profit organizations as well.
Mm-hmm. And working with these clients, what type of activities and presentations can students expect to carry out with this subject?
It really does depend on the client. So when you go into a normal subject, every student is doing the same thing. You're all doing the same assignment. It's all 1,000 words and you're expected to be doing very similar things. Whereas management consulting, every single project is completely different. So you have some that are purely just looking at company data that's being provided to them by the client. Others, it is a combination of company data, but also secondary research. Then you've got, it sort of evolves, and you've got, interviews, focus groups, surveys, and anything in between. So there's no one that fits all types of clients and all types of projects. Every single one is completely different. And the thing is, too, even what the client gives you from day one drastically changes over the semester, because the client's got no idea what's going on. The client's like, look, we want to go and look at this particular area. We think this might be what it is that we want to focus on. And then students get involved, and very quickly they're like, actually, no, that's not the area. That's not the direction. You need to pivot and you need to look elsewhere. So the outcomes of the projects really differ as well. Whereas, some clients want very clear recommendations on what they need to change, and other clients don't want recommendations. They just want the students to present them with the facts, the information, and the client comes to the recommendation or the conclusion on what to do. So it's a really varied types of projects and what is expected within those projects. And the students may think that the client knows everything. The students may think that the subject coordinator and the tutors and the mentors know everything. We're sort of learning at the same time, because we don't know what it is that the client wants, and we're learning as the students are learning as well. So, it is our job to give advice and mentor and push the students in a particular direction, but it's largely dependent on sort of the motivation of the students.
Mm-hmm. And how are students graded throughout this learning experience?
There's a variety of different assessments. So early on, it's very important for a subject like this to keep momentum happening throughout the semester. So a normal subject, you may have one individual assignment, one group assignment, and an exam, and that's it. Whereas this one has a multitude of different assessment tasks. It's almost entirely group work. It's probably, and this is the thing, if you don't like group work, don't do this subject, because you are reliant on the group for the entire time. So I think it's about, from memory, like 90% group work. You do, very early on, you do a team contract. So you work out, what's the project about? Who are we? What are our expectations? When are we meeting? And all of those kinds of things. Do a data collection plan early on as well, to work out how you're going to be collecting data throughout the semester, because that's really important as well, because as I said, there's a multitude of different things that you're going to need to do for the particular project. There are presentations to the academic staff that you're assessed on. You also have to do one to your client. There is the written report, which is the bulk of the marks. It's around 5,000 words, but we're sort of changing the wording of that this semester, because many clients don't want these stuffy reports anymore. They want it to be presented in different ways. There's also peer review elements where students review one another. Sometimes everyone's really happy with how the team went, and then other times they're not. So that's interesting to find out in the peer review stuff. There's also an individual reflection that students do. And there's one other thing that you can probably tell me from the handbook. I've missed one thing, I think it's worth 5%. But yeah, there's lots of different elements, but majority of them are group work elements.
Mm-hmm. And finally, do you have any insider tips on how to do well and really succeed in this subject?
So as I said before, for the entire semester, it's group work. So it's really important to be able to work out early on, how does the team work together, who's good at what, and this is what you do very early on with the contract. But it's really important to keep reviewing this as the semester goes on. The thing is, though, something that you work out in week 1 may not be the same in weeks 5, 7, 9, etc. And all of us, even when I was at studying 100 years ago, you get exhausted by week 8, week 9, and I know this from teaching. Student attendance drops off, students, even in the Zoom calls, everyone's, got their cameras off because no one could be bothered to have a shower or whatever. So the thing is, keep the momentum going throughout the semester. And that has a lot to do with managing expectations in the group, because you know how you feel as the semester goes on. You might feel grumpy, you might feel frustrated, you might go, I don't want to do work today, but you are working in a team, you are working for a client. So you've got the coordinator's expectations to manage, you've got your client's expectations, and you might have different clients clients that you are working with. You've got your fellow students and you have your tutors. So there's lots of different people that you are managing the expectations of, as well as yourself. You've got 3 other subjects, you've got a part-time job, you have a life, I think, outside of all of that. So you need to make sure that you're managing all of that. And the only way to do well in this subject is to work as a team. So work out, what's causing conflict. How can I fix that? Some students, the first thing that they did was come to me. And it's like, that is not the way to do it. Even though early on we say to them, how are you going to, manage conflict? We have some students who thought they knew better and wanted to sort of run the entire team, but it's a distributed leadership model where no one is in charge. I mean, you can determine that in your groups. You can say, look, if there is conflict, this is the person that's going to break it. But ultimately, you need to be able to sort of manage all of those things. The other thing too is don't be discouraged if the project is not something that you're an expert in. So a lot of students get really disappointed early on going, I don't know this company, I don't know this topic. You will be an expert on it by the end of it. I promise you. And I teach into different programs like the business practicum, which is the postgraduate version of this subject, which is done over 10 days. So students come in knowing nothing about marketing, for example, finishing knowing so much about it. They learn along the way. So don't be discouraged if you don't get one of the big 4 banks or you don't get a consulting firm. Do your best, work really hard. It's great for the business, that the client that you're working with, as well as the team. And probably lastly is, like I said before, keep the momentum happening, because it is a long semester. It's not something that's done in 2 weeks. It's done over 12 weeks. So you need to keep going for the entire time.
Great. Well, I think that's all the questions we had. Thank you so much for being here. I know this subject is in high demand each year, so your insight was really great. Thank you.
Happy to help.
The other sort of real-world oriented subject that you might choose to take in the summer or winter term as one of your management electives is global management consulting, which usually takes place overseas, but with the pandemic, it's been on Zoom. To take us through the experience, we're joined by Tina. So, Tina, thank you so much for coming on Samcast. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role?
Sure, thanks for having me. So my name is Tina Kula. I'm an associate professor in the International Management Group in the Department of Management and Marketing. I'm the subject coordinator for Global Management Consulting. Usually I take teams to Berlin, and I've taken teams to Hong Kong and Singapore and Bangkok and other places before. But at the moment, we're doing everything remotely, still with company partners all over the world. But essentially, we're focusing at the moment on what students can learn about global virtual teamwork, given the pandemic that we're in.
Yeah, that sounds terrific. Could you maybe take us through just an overall look at the subject and what exactly you're actually doing while you're working with the company?
So usually we recruit company partners that have a form of realistic business question or business problem that they would like some assistance with in terms of either assessing a new market opportunity, or maybe developing a marketing plan for one of their products, or maybe even developing some sort of new strategy for their HR system. It can be quite broad, but essentially the company hosts have some sort of task that they would like students to work on for a little while, to then provide some recommendations what the company could do in the future. Now, this allows students to work on a realistic problem for a little while, apply what they've learned in the context of their studies, but also really take most of what they've studied a step further. There are lots of things that happen in projects that don't usually happen in your other classes. Usually in classes, everything is a little bit more planned than what happens in real projects. And so it also gives students a bit of a chance to, learn on their feet, adapt to specific contexts, adapt essentially also to the industries in which their companies are located. And that gives them lots of new knowledge, lots of kind of more applied knowledge in a particular area that they may not have known much about before. So that's kind of what we do. The projects vary, as I said before. Students get assigned to projects. They have to work in multidisciplinary teams. And then basically they have to scope the project. They have to decide with their company client how they want to approach it, and then have to carry out all the research and all the work that's associated with solving that business problem. And of course, then finally present their solutions to the company host.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like you're getting a realistic look at what consultants do. Would you say that it's, I guess, good experience for when you actually or potentially go into a consulting role afterwards? Like, how similar is the experience you get in global management consulting to that of a real consultant or someone interning?
Well, so it's not an internship. In that sense, it's actually really much more similar to a consulting project. And I have lots of consulting friends and tell them about the projects, and they're often surprised that, we recruit students for this that early in their career. But it's a great opportunity, I think, if you want to explore consulting. But I think it's also a great opportunity if you hadn't really thought about consulting as one of your career paths, because in the end, you still have to work within an organization. There's a lot of within organization consulting as well. So where essentially you're being given a particular problem that you need to solve. That's similar whether or not you do this from the outside as a consultant or from the inside as an employee. So it affords students kind of an early exposure of what work life looks like and what the kind of problems are that they would deal with as they are working in real companies and not on learning projects that are designed for them to basically be solved easily. So that's the major difference, that you really get your feet wet.
Mm. No, that makes complete sense. Would you say that's maybe one of the more enjoyable aspects of the experience for students, or what tends to be the highlight?
Let's put it this way, it's not always that enjoyable when it happens at the time. I think the enjoyable part is actually figuring it out. So it's the enjoyable part is, making it happen despite some of the challenges. Some students might find the challenge themselves enjoyable, but I think most students find it more enjoyable once they figured it out.
No, definitely.
For us, I think it's really kind of that learning opportunity. I mean, so we recruit students that are usually quite good in their other classes. So they're doing well in their normal classes, and they may never have really gotten to a point where the project or task that they were given was as complex as what they're getting in global management consulting. So for us, it's a learning opportunity to hit some of the students with something that's not expected and that they haven't prepared for in its entirety, and to really then test, can they do it, right? And it actually empowers students quite a bit once they've survived, once they've actually made it through, and really kind of a badge of accomplishment that they can work on a project for 3 weeks and get something valuable done that is very well received by their client.
No, that makes complete sense. I was going to say there's definitely like a perception that global management consulting is maybe a bit intimidating.
Sure.
Do you find that this is an experience that even beginners could sort of sign up for, or do you need to have like some sort of experience or like competencies with consulting?
You don't necessarily need competencies with consulting. So we usually get quite a range of students that apply and that we accept. So some of them have some experience, either from case competitions or because they've done internships before that had similar components, but quite a few have no such experience. And so it's not geared necessarily at just experts in consulting. It's also geared towards basically students learning from each other. So everybody brings different capabilities and different experiences, and all of these are valuable. So we can't really predict, what's going to come in handy, because we can't predict all the specific problems that a team might run into. So it's definitely for novices, for people who have had some experience. I think you just get different things out of it depending on at what stage you're at. People take over different roles within the team depending on their experience, for example, or they may take on different tasks, work on different things depending on how much experience they bring and what kind of experience they bring. So, but there's definitely learning experience for everybody in there.
Yeah, that sounds really great. I guess a lot of our listeners would probably be curious, is there any way they can sort of increase their likelihood of being selected for this experience?
Well, I don't know, yes and no. So I mean, first and foremost, especially at the moment, we shortlist based on WEMs. So increasing your likelihood is making sure that your WEM's over the threshold. Now, we can't really predict either kind of what the threshold will be every semester, because that depends a little bit on the quality of people who apply. So keeping your WEM up is kind of important. I think it always is.
Yeah.
But then after that, we look at a lot of different things. So because we have to build functioning teams, we don't just look for team members that are all the same, that all are, shown high performance or have shown high performing attitudes. We're looking at people who can fulfill different roles within the team. So some of them, as we call them, are kind of our social glue people. So the people who keep the team together, who can make sure that the team atmosphere stays positive and that everybody keeps being involved. We have others that may take on more of the thought leadership because they may have specific expertise in the task that they've been assigned. We may have people that take on more of a monitor role, so kind of making sure that everybody stays on track and that, everybody stays within the time allocated to things, etc. So in that sense, kind of we look for people that bring those different skills and that might have had some prior experiences in their extracurricular activities that may already kind of set them up a little bit in the particular industry or in the task that we have. Not everybody has to have that, but it's kind of handy to have at least one person in the team done a little bit of something in that place, in that industry, or in that kind of space before. But we often learn only about the projects after we've done team member selection. So in that sense, we pick based on a wide range of people so that we are flexible in making sure that the tasks get solved by a group of people that is actually capable of doing so.
Yeah, wow, it sounds like a complicated process for you guys. It must take a while. I guess our final question was just, in your opinion, like how important is having that global experience of like working with multinational companies, and I guess how can it translate into important skill outcomes down the road?
There are several points here, I think. So first and foremost, when you look at kind of surveys of graduates, most people want to work internationally at some point in their lives. So kind of this is good preparation for that, for kind of just figuring out how to adapt to a work context that isn't one that you're necessarily used to. The other part is that, most companies in the space that some of our graduates might work in are either multicultural companies, or they have a very diverse workforce, or they work with a lot of clients from other countries. So there's really no escaping the idea of working in a global workforce or workspace. So it's kind of good to know how people from different countries work. Now, doing one trip to whatever GMC location or even working globally in different countries isn't going to make you the global workforce candidate number one. But it definitely gives you a good grounding in the fact that there are just differences in how people approach projects and just kind of dealing with different difficulties that you may not have thought of before, depending on where you've worked before. So in terms of giving that exposure is important. Remotely, we can do the same thing because you're still working with company clients that are elsewhere in the world. So you're still learning from them. You're still figuring out how they're approaching the problem, how they would like you to present on the problem. So they're giving you a lot of mentorship, really. So we're really kind of learning buddies, I think, with the company hosts to give you a lot of mentorship of what might happen in their workplaces and what might be required in their workplaces. And I think with the remote working that we have at the moment, that's really important because in a sense, even if you're working in Australia with multinational clients, you will mostly work with them remotely. So this is kind of actually even a more realistic setting than jet setting around the world and spending 2 weeks here and 2 weeks there. That's kind of more the exception, I think. Most consultants work within country, often within the same city, but they may work with different clients from different backgrounds. So it's quite realistic in that sense. And it's for us a really good way to get students some early exposure to that kind of high stakes, but also kind of high speed context that is quite accelerated, I think, in comparison to other classes.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Tina. That was fantastic insights. I think everyone's going to benefit from hearing about that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us on Samcast today. If you're interested in applying for one of these incredible opportunities, the deadline for Global Management Consulting's July intake is actually coming up, so check out the FBE website. See you next time on Samcast, where we will be covering other interesting topics in the world of management and marketing.